I need help. I need to know if I became a millionaire today.
I got you, Stella.
I have hundreds of vintage stamps from the globe.
Let's see what you got. What you have there are 3 stock books, and this first page appears to be all postally used French stamps. These are obviously French stamps because you have the very common Sower and Crest definitive series that are a hallmark of France and were used there for decades. If you start looking at the individuals beneath those definitives, you have Scott 968, which is this woman in red right here, as well as Scott 850, which is a green reservoir scene and came out in 1957, and then Scott number 753 and 755, which are both Mary Ann statues. All of these are very common stamps and are going to catalog out at the minimum value. Next, you showed us 2 pages of US postally used stamps that I'm very familiar with because this is actually my collecting specialty. Everything on these pages appears to be commemoratives and definitives that were put out from the 1950s. Your definitives, you have both the Prexy and Liberty series, as well as the 1940s Win the War stamp, as well as some common airmails. The earliest stamp you have on here is the 2-cent Washington 4th Bureau, which was issued from 1922 to 1930, but is one of the most common stamps there is, with over 100 billion being issued. And again, almost every single one of these stamps is going to bring the catalog minimum value. Next, you show us a page from Malaysia, which has very common stamps from the 1960s and the 1950s, all of which are used postally. This page of Magyar Posta stamps is actually from Hungary, which is something that you learn very early on as a stamp collector, and all of these are postally used, but these are probably actually canceled to order. Hungary was known for putting out stamps that were to be sold directly to collectors that they would cancel at the post office and sell them postally used. Opposite that, you have a page of common Netherlands definitives that were used anywhere between the 30s and the 1950s, and then 1 or 2 commemorative stamps that were issued sometime in the 1950s. The last page you show has British stamps on it, mostly the Christmas issue from 1960 to the 1970s, and actually the 2 most interesting stamps in the entire book are these 2 right here, which is the 2-shilling 6-pence castle and the 5-shilling castle, but both of these are going to be fairly inexpensive, and the catalog high of under $1 for the 5-shilling stamp is going to be the best stamp you have in any of these albums. Now, when I assess a collection like this, I'm not really assessing the stamp collection so much as I am the stamp collector. Even with a very small collection like this, 1,000 stamps to go through and try to identify would actually take you hours and hours of time to check for watermarks and perf varieties and all kinds of different other things. But there are several things about this collection that tell me a lot about what I'm looking at without going through and identifying every single stamp. First of all, there's no discernible order aside from having stamps grouped by country on separate pages, which is a very, very basic way of organizing stamps and can only be done if you have a very small collection. The other thing that stands out is the decision to display so many stamps that are so very, very, very common. Like, for example, this 2-cent George Washington Liberty series right here is a stamp that was used on almost every piece of mail for over a decade in the United States and was printed in the billions. There's no way this stamp is so incredible that it should be displayed in a stock book when you have hundreds of other stamps in glassine envelopes, and it tells me where this collector was at in his collection when it was discarded. So in my assessment, this was a beginner's collection that was mostly put together from stamps that he soaked off from mail that came either into his household or that he procured from people that he knew. Now, that doesn't mean that the stamp collection has no value, but I can tell you that it has no value to me, and if it was offered, I would turn it down, because the only thing I even found interesting in it was this big oversized stock book that looks like it came out in the 30s or 40s and probably isn't worth even paying for the shipping to send it to me. I would recommend taking as many pictures as you can, listing it on eBay, and if you get anywhere north of $25 plus shipping, you're doing pretty well on this collection. Better luck next time.